12 centuries ago, a man named Boniface walked into the Germanic forests with an axe in hand. He was a Christian missionary, and he came to fell a god. Donar's oak, the sacred tree of the pagans, stood tall and defiant. But Boniface struck it down. He lived, and history called it a triumph of light over darkness. In 1976, another man, Boniface, stepped into a different forest, a strip of trees inside the Korean demilitarized zone. He too carried an axe, but he did not leave alive. The morning of August 18th, 1976, began without fanfare. It was hot and still in the Joint Security Area, a thin strip of shared territory inside the Korean demilitarized zone. UN troops and North Korean soldiers stood in uneasy proximity, bound by an agreement not to carry rifles or pistols. Only fists, knives, and words were allowed. The tree, that damned poplar, stood near Checkpoint 3, blocking visibility between it and Observation Post 5. A blind spot, a threat. The UN command had trimmed it before. They would trim it again. Captain Arthur Boniface, 33 years old, led the team. With him, First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, 4 Korean Service Corps civilians, and a few South Korean guards. They brought axes. They did not bring guns. Because rules, because diplomacy, because no one thought this would matter. At first, it was just noise, shouting in Korean from across the bridge. Then, North Korean guards appeared. 15, then 20, then 30, led by Lieutenant Pak Chul, known by UN forces as Lieutenant Bulldog for his stocky frame and habit of picking fights. He approached, furious. "You must stop this at once," he said. Boniface ignored him, turned his back. That was enough. It began. The North Koreans surged. They tore the axes from the workers, used them. Captain Boniface died almost instantly, bludgeoned, beaten to the ground. Lieutenant Barrett tried to run. He made it 50 yards before they caught him. He died alone beneath the tree. Back at UN command, the radio crackled. Distorted voices. Screaming. The report came in. 2 Americans killed. 4 others wounded. No North Korean casualties. The room went quiet. Then the phone started ringing. In Washington, President Gerald Ford convened the National Security Council. In South Korea, General Richard Stilwell briefed the Joint Chiefs. And in Seoul, General William J. Livesey called for an immediate and overwhelming response. But not war. Something more theatrical. No more work shirts. No more empty hands. This time, the tree would come down under armed guard. This time, the show of force would be so ridiculous, so excessive, so utterly overwhelming that no one would dare interfere. They would call it Operation Paul Bunyan, and it would become the most heavily armed tree-cutting mission in the history of the world. It began like an invasion, because it nearly was. Within hours of the killings, the wheels of retaliation were turning. Plans were drawn, code names assigned. The response would be psychological, symbolic, and supremely over the top. The poplar tree would be removed, but it wouldn't be subtle. No, this would be a message to North Korea, to China, to the Soviet Union, and to the world. August 21st, 1976. 3 days after the murders, just after dawn, the road to the joint security area trembled under a convoy of military vehicles. Trucks, jeeps, bulldozers. A column of South Korean special forces, clad in black face paint and armed to the teeth, followed close behind. Helmets gleamed. Rifles were loaded. Then came the engineers, 13 men with chainsaws, surrounded by 813 troops, all combat ready. Helicopters thrummed overhead, UH-1s, CH-47 Chinooks, AH-1 Cobras, circling like angry hornets. In the skies above, B-52 Stratofortresses roared in formation, each capable of levelling cities, flanked by F-4 Phantom jets out of Okinawa. Armed, fueled, fully visible. This was not subtle. On the coast, the aircraft carrier USS Midway repositioned itself off South Korea. South Korean F-5s scrambled from bases inland. Artillery units took aim. Nuclear strike options were reviewed. At the DMZ itself, dozens of Minya 728 CEV tanks rolled into position. Bridge units activated. Radio channels buzzed. South Korean loudspeakers broadcast military marches and anti-communist slogans across the line. Inside the joint security area, the tension was thick enough to slice with a bayonet. North Korean soldiers watched in stunned silence. Not a word. Not a move. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. General William Livesey stood at command post, Freedom Bridge. He watched through binoculars as the poplar tree shuddered. Saws screeched. Branches fell. One by one. It took 42 minutes. Not a single shot was fired. When the last chunk of trunk hit the ground, the chainsaws powered down. The engineers gave thumbs up. The troops did not cheer. They were told not to. This was not a celebration. It was a performance. And it was not quite over. From the North Korean side, silence. No retaliation. No ambush. No last-minute lunge. They stood. They watched. They listened to the scream of chainsaws under the blades of attack helicopters. They counted tanks, jets, soldiers. They held their breath. And then they backed down. That same day, a message arrived. Official, from Pyongyang. It expressed regret over the deaths of the 2 American officers. Not responsibility, not apology, but regret. In North Korean propaganda, it was described differently. They claimed the Americans had provoked the attack, that the soldiers acted in self-defense. But privately, Kim Il-sung was said to be furious with his own officers. Their little outburst had nearly started World War III. The poplar tree was gone, ground down to the stump. The US forces had cleared the line of sight between their posts. They'd also made a point. If the North killed again, the next mission wouldn't be about lumber. The absurdity of it all, chainsaws and bombers, engineers in helmets, diplomacy through brute performance. It became textbook Cold War theatre. Maximum pressure, minimum bloodshed, and no room for nuance. In the decades that followed, the joint security area remained tense. Guards stood face to face, watchful, still armed, still afraid. But the poplar tree never grew back. Instead, they planted a memorial, a plaque in the ground where the stump once stood, where 2 men died with axes in their hands, where the sky thundered with war machines to honor them, where peace was kept by spectacle. This was Operation Paul Bunyan, the most dangerous tree removal in human history, and one of the strangest moments of the Cold War. If you enjoyed this true tale of Cold War absurdity, subscribe for more stories where history gets stranger than fiction. New videos every week, narrated, dramatized, and always real. Thanks for watching.